Hare Krishna, everyone. A very warm welcome back to our continued series on the glories of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashtacha Deshatarane. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So today we are introducing a new format. Many devotees have requested. We will be giving our lectures in English, without translation, without Russian translation. At the same time, we'll continue with the English-Russian translation format as well, which means that we'll be posting 2 classes every Tuesday and Friday, for English speakers and for Russian speakers. Some devotees were suggesting that for the Russian presentation we have voice over the English presentation or subtitles, but I don't really like that. It's a little impersonal, and Krishna conscience is something very personal. So this way we're going to cover all the bases, so to say. So when we upload, there'll be 2 choices. You can choose straight English lecture or English Russian. A little more work for me. I'm going to record twice, but it's my seva to all of you wonderful devotees. So for those of you who are watching now, you've chosen the English version. So here we go. So today we're going to continue with our discussions on the city of Mathura. The other day, we concluded with Krishna's rejoining the Brajabasis in their encampment, just inside the perimeter of Mathura. The Brajabasi men in particular had come with Krishna and Balaram on the invitation of King Kamsa for a wrestling match in Mathura. Everyone left Vrindavan to come to Mathura. Now, in that lecture, we mentioned that Nanda Maharaj and the cowherd men, they actually arrived before Krishna and Balaram and Thakura arrived in Mathura. And we explained that by the fact that Thakura, when taking Krishna and Balaram along the way, he stopped the chariot to bathe in the Jamuna River. So that's the whole Leela. We've discussed it before. So, they were a little bit late. Cowherd men all arrived early. But Shukadev Goswami also gives an interesting reason why Thakura, Krishna and Balaram came late. He writes that as Thakura's chariot rolled along the road from Vrindavan to Mathura, people came out along the way to see Krishna and Balaram. And overcome with joy, they were unable to take their eyes off of Krishna and Balaram. In fact, the acharyas say, as the chariot proceeded, people tried to pull Krishna and Balaram back with their eyes. As a result, the chariot proceeded very slowly. So when Krishna and Balaram finally arrived in Mathura, Nanda Maharaj rushed forward and he said, Krishna, where have you been? Where were you gone for so long? But Krishna didn't reply. He just smiled and embraced Nanda Maharaj. So, also in our last class, we discussed how after arriving in Mathura, Krishna took a stroll around the city, like on a tour. And on the way, he met with friends and envious demons. We discussed the washerman, and when we discussed the tailor, and we discussed, who was the last one we discussed? We discussed, a number of personalities. Sridham, the florist. But one pastime we didn't discuss last week on purpose because it's quite a long pastime, very involved with a lot of different angles to it, was Krishna's meeting with Kubja while he was touring Mathura city. Now, there's a specific market, it's mentioned, inside Mathura, where Krishna met Kubja. It's described that Krishna was immediately enchanted by seeing her, because although she was deformed as a hunchback, she had a very lovely face, it's described. So Krishna asked her, "My dear lady, what is your name?" So Kubja smiled and she said, "My name is Trivakra." Trivakra. Trivakra means literally twisted or bent in three places. Now the acharyas say that while she gave her name, she was smiling. And by the smile she hinted to Krishna that although I'm crooked on the outside, my heart is actually very straight. And why? Because there is nothing in it but love for you. It's really beautiful. The acharyas also say that she was indicating, quote, that you and I, Krishna, we have a lot in common. I am Trivakra, ugly, twisted in three places, but you are Tribhanga, very beautiful. You're also bent in three places. Tribhanga Sundar. Sundar means beautiful. So when Krishna plays his flute, he's bent in three places. So she concluded, how lucky I am to have met you. This is how they met. So during that meeting, Kubja offered Krishna very special ointments and perfumes, which were actually meant for King Kamsa, because her service to the king was to make these ointments and perfume. Something simple, but it's how she maintained her life. But after meeting Krishna, she decided to give it all to Krishna. And that was huge surrender, because she could be put to death by giving away the king's property. But she did it. Now, it's very interesting that Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, 42nd chapter, verse number 4, gives us 6 reasons why Kubja was so surrendered, immediately surrendered to Krishna when she met him, and took the risk of giving all these supplies to Krishna. So in that verse it's described that the first reason she surrendered to Krishna, and it's interesting for us, we would also like to become surrendered to Krishna, but how and why? It's described. We can follow Kubja in this sense. The first reason she surrendered everything to Krishna is because Krishna is so beautiful. Krishna is the original source of all beauty. And the verse says that his beauty enveloped her consciousness. So number one. Number two, the second reason that she surrendered to Krishna was because of his charm. And it's described that Krishna's charm can be seen in his youthful appearance. He never looks older than 16 years. Prabhupada said that one time. You'll never see a picture of Krishna older than 16. The Yovanam Sham, he's eternally youthful. For example, that charm was noticed that when he eventually entered the sacrificial arena to fight the wrestlers, we're jumping ahead here just a little bit, the women who were in the audience were surprised. They hadn't seen Krishna, they'd heard about Krishna in Vrindavan, but they hadn't seen him. So when Krishna made his entrance into the fighting arena, the wrestling arena, they all looked, they said, oh, look, Krishna, he's such a charming youth. So everyone's charmed by Krishna's beauty and his youth. Then the third reason she surrendered was because of Krishna's sweetness. Krishna is very sweet. And there's a very famous shlok, a very famous stanza describing, well, there's several, but the first one is very beautiful, by Ballabhacharya from the Pusti Marg, describing Krishna's sweetness. Adaram madhuram, bharanam madhuram, nayanam madhuram, astitam madhuram, hridayam madhuram, gamanam madhuram, madhuradi pater akilam madhuram. Just hearing it in the Sanskrit is very sweet. The translation, his lips are sweet, his face is sweet, his eyes are sweet, his smile is sweet, his heart is sweet, his walk, his gait is sweet. Everything is sweet about the Lord of sweetness. So then, number 4, Hasita, Krishna's enchanting smile. Actually, throughout our Gaudiya Vaishnava literature, we often hear about Krishna's smile and how he enchants his devotees with the smile. And in Krishna book, we hear that the gopis refer to this beautiful smile of Krishna. And I quote, "Dear Krishna, you are the killer of all the fears of the inhabitants of Vrindavan. You are the supremely powerful hero, and we know that you can kill the unnecessary pride of your devotees, as well as the pride of women like us, simply by your beautiful smile." Simply by your beautiful smile. So then number 5, another reason she surrendered? Krishna's words, which are captivating, as we know. Krishna's words are there in 700 verses, recorded or written down in Bhagavad Gita, and we never tire of hearing the Bhagavad Gita. So yes, Krishna's words are captivating. Then the last reason why she surrendered, it was for Krishna's look. In what sense? That when Kubja saw that Krishna was looking at her with love, she said, quote, "I am your servant. From now on, do whatever you want with me. I will no longer serve anyone else." So nice. So one of our acharyas has said that the Srimad Bhagavatam often glorifies the devotion of women, such as Draupadi, Kunti, Gauri, etc., because he says women have a natural inclination towards Krishna. Prabhupada commented one time, you look at the religions of the world, most of those religions there's more ladies than there are men, he said, because the ladies have very soft hearts. And this acharya was saying that women have a natural inclination towards Krishna. Men may be inclined to worship other forms of the Lord, but women are generally attracted to worshiping Krishna. He says, not the Lord in the form of a turtle or a fish or a boar or half man, half lion. And he gives the example that when the Lord appeared as Nrsingadev, Prahlad was very pleased with him. Came out of the pillar, and Prahlad looked and he said, "Oh, how beautiful. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder." And then, of course, Nrsingadev killed Hiranyakashipu, and Hiranyakashipu was kicked off the lap of the Lord, and he was still angry. So at that moment, Brahma said to Lakshmi Devi, "Please go calm the Nrsingadev down." So Lakshmi thought, yes, I will go to him and give him a garland. After all, he's my husband. So of course he will calm down immediately. But when she came closer, the Acharya says, and saw all the blood, she ran in another direction. She thought, he's not in a very good mood right now. It's better to stay out of his way. So Kubja, being a lady, she was naturally attracted to Krishna, so much so that she freely offered the items she carried, which were meant for King Kamsa, to Krishna. And we'll discuss that a little bit more later on, because there's a lot of different angles that we can understand that and appreciate her surrender. So all this took place in that market at Krishna's and Kubja's first meeting. And I found a very interesting statement in scripture that any woman who lives near that market, even today, for 3 years, and sincerely worships Lord Krishna, as Kubja did with fine oils and sandalwood paste, will be cured of any serious deformity or affliction. These are not exaggerations. Shastra does not exaggerate. So it's an interesting statement. Now, although Kubja appeared as you could say, a simple seller of wares, perfumes and ointments, Srila Visvanatha Cakravarti Thakur writes that Kubja was actually a partial expansion of Satyabhama, one of Krishna's principal queens in Dwarka. He says, Satyabhama is the Lord's internal energy known as Bhu Shakti. And he says that this expansion of Satyabhama, Kubja, is also known as Prithvi, or Mother Earth, or Bhumi. This is who Kubja is. Now the great sage Narada Muni, he's also revealed more about Kubja's identity. He says that she was previously the sister of Ravana, Suparnaka, in Ramlila, who, as we know, Suparnaka, fell in love with Lord Ramachandra when she saw him in the forest, because again, Krishna's all attractive. So when Suparnaka saw Sita, the wife of Ram, she tried to kill her, and was then defaced by Lakshman, who cut off her nose. We all know that Suparnaka got revenge by inspiring her brother Ravana to kidnap Sita, but she remained enamored with Ram and was determined that one day she would become his wife. Thus it's described early in the Ramayana, after becoming disfigured, Suparnaka retired to Pushkara Tirtha, where she meditated on Lord Shiva underwater for 10,000 years, hoping to get his mercy. I was thinking that, so many devotees like that, they undergo severe penances and austerities for sometimes millenniums. But in this age, you can get mercy very quickly by the Yuga Dharma of chanting Hare Krishna. We are blessed. So she meditated on Lord Shiva underwater for 10,000 years, hoping to get his mercy. And Lord Shiva, who's easily pleased and easily displeased, Ashutosh, he eventually appeared to Suparnaka and offered her any boon she desired. So what did she ask? She asked Lord Shiva that Lord Ram could become her husband. So Lord Shiva said, at that particular time, this is not possible. But in the future, he said, at the end of Dwapara Yuga in Mathura city, your wish will come true. So in this way, by the grace of Lord Shiva, Suparnaka was reborn as the hunchback Kubja. So how did she get a relationship with Krishna as a wife? That we'll explain a little bit later on. So Suparnaka was reborn as the hunchback Kubja. Now the question has been asked, or it's been raised in spiritual circles, as to how Kubja can be both Prithvi, the earth personified Bhumi, and Suparnaka, the Rakshasi sister of Ravana at the same time. It's like Rasa Basa. But the acharyas answered that both ladies were present in Kubja simultaneously. Now, it's interesting that Kubja is also identified as Mathura in Ayodhya. Those of you who are familiar with Ramayana, you know Mathura is the evil woman who assisted Kaikeyi in getting Lord Ramchandra banished to the forest for 14 years. How do we know? It's stated in Sri Garga Samhita 5:17-15, and I quote, "The groups of gopis headed by Sri Lalita said, the girl Kubja in Mathura city had been Mathura in Ayodhya, where she stopped the coronation of Lord Ramachandra. O gopis, what offense has Kubja not committed in previous lives?" So taking this all together, we have an interesting perspective of who is Kubja. She's Kubja, She's Satyabhama, Mathura, Prithivi, Bhumi, the earth personified, and Supernaka, the Rakshashi sister of Ravana. 5 in 1. It's esoteric, but it's absolute truth. Actually, the presence of multiple personalities in one body is found repeatedly in our Gora Gunadesha Dipika by the illustrious Kavikarnapura. For example, one example he gives is Ramananda Rai, who Kavikarnapura says is Lalita Devi, Pandava Arjuna, Arun Iya Gopi, and the cowherd boy, the Gopa Arjuna. And additionally, Srila Prabhupada in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Madhya Lila 8:23, he says that Ramananda Rai is Vishaka Devi. So there we go. So now that we know her identity, we can appreciate her more. And we can be excited what's going to happen in this transcendental relationship. Let's go back to the market in Mathura and discuss some more details. So as Krishna was walking through this market in Mathura, he saw Kubja as a hunchback woman, and Bhagavatam says he recognized her. Krishna thought, quote, "No man has ever been friendly to this girl of deformed limbs. If I ask her for the perfume she is carrying, she will be purified by the desire to be with me." So Krishna addressed her. He said, "O beautiful lotus-eyed girl with crooked movements, who are you?" So Shastra says, pleased to receive the attention of such a handsome boy as Krishna, Kubja replied, "My name is Trivakra, and I'm a servant of King Kamsa," as we discussed. So Krishna joked a little bit and he said, "Well, your name suits you, but tell me, those ointments and perfumes you are so carefully carrying, for whom are they meant?" So Kubja answered, "The ointment and sandalwood paste are the property of my master, King Kamsa. The king has many women, but he likes me for the cosmetics I provide." So seeing 2 flasks or 2 bottles of perfume or ointments Kubja was carrying, Krishna said, "Well, why not give me and my brother Balaram some perfume and be blessed?" So the acharyas comment that although Kubja was employed by King Kamsa, her attachment for Krishna made her fearless. So 2 things here. Seeing Krishna, she became surrendered, and then that attachment resulted in her becoming fearless. Now we hear of devotees becoming fearless, like our Guru Maharaj, Srila Prabhupada. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura kept that name, Abhay Charan, A.C., Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada. A devotee becomes fearless in the service of the Lord because he knows the Lord will protect him because he's doing the most important thing. He's carrying on the Lord's mission of in this world to deliver devotees, annihilate miscreants, and reestablish Dharma. So Krishna's got her back. So her attachment for Krishna made her fearless. So as we mentioned, even at the risk of losing her life, she gave away the king's property. And holding the flasks of perfume out to Krishna and Balaram, she said, "Take as much as you like." So yes, we see this fearlessness in great devotees and advanced devotees. I remember this was an outstanding quality of one of my very dear godbrothers, Tribhuvanath Prabhu from UK, who unfortunately passed away in 2001. But he's a good example of fearlessness and service to Prabhupada. I remember he went to the most dangerous places at that time to print, get translated in print Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita. He went to Lebanon, he went to Syria. He was in East Africa in a bus with devotees traveling and preaching. But against all opposition, he was successful in his efforts because he had no fear. Successful to spread Krishna consciousness in those places. And he did it also with an enchanting smile. If you ever see some photos of Tribhuvan, his big smile. Anyway, we used to do Harinam together in London. So nice memories. So like that, Kubja was fearless in giving away the king's property to Krishna and Balaram. So Krishna smeared some of the ointment, some of the perfume on his limbs, and Balaram did the same. And meanwhile, the coward boys, their boys are watching all this, Kubja and Krishna and these amorous feelings going between them, and they're the coward boys. So I said at that point, one of the coward boys joked, "Now this lovely woman has two lovers." So Kubja pleased Krishna by serving him at the risk of losing her life. And thinking of her as Prithivi, or Bhumi, the earth personified, the Lord said to himself, I should show her mercy and bless her with my love. So he spoke to Kubja. He said, "My dearest Tivakra, you have served me and my friends so well that you deserve a reward. May I have permission to straighten your body?" So Kubja replied, "I happily accept your proposal, but how will you do it?" So Krishna said, and it made the coward boys laugh, "I know a special way to correct deformities like yours." The coward boys are looking like, what? So Kubja proposed, "Please do it, and then come to my house." Now, when she said, "Come to my house," Krishna was a little embarrassed in front of the coward boys and the public who was gathering around. So he said, "My dear lady, we have other business to attend to, so I cannot go to your house today. But have faith in my words and let everyone present here witness the change I will bring about in you now. Just see." So saying this, Krishna placed his feet on Kubja's feet, and with his index fingers on both of his hands under her chin, he jerked upwards, he pulled upwards like that, and straightened out Kubja's body. Not only straightened it out, but she became extremely beautiful. It's described that she was evenly proportioned, her skin was smooth, and she radiated like the sun. And again, a crowd had collected, and it's described that when this happened, they cheered at witnessing Krishna's mercy upon Kubja. So the acharyas say that Kubja was now suddenly wealthy with the treasures of youth and beauty. So she tugged on Krishna's upper cloth, indicating her desire to share her new fortunes with him in amorous love. The acharyas say Krishna had truly stolen her heart. We also want Krishna to steal our hearts too. So there's a beautiful verse in Padyavali by Rupa Goswami about how Krishna steals hearts. He's a thief, he steals hearts. It's verse 102. I love this verse. "A dark-complexioned thief has stolen my heart. Look, he has already stolen the sins of the surrendered devotees, the life breath of Putana, the bracelets and garments of the young gopis, and the eyes and hearts of saintly devotees." Let's repeat that one more time. "A dark-complexioned thief has stolen my heart. Just look, he has already stolen the sins of surrendered devotees, the life breath of Putana, the bracelets and garments of the young gopis, and the eyes and hearts of saintly devotees." So Srila Prabhupada describes what happened after the moment that Krishna straightened Kubja out. Very nicely describes in Krishna book, chapter 42. He writes, quote, "When the woman was turned by Krishna's favor into an exquisitely beautiful girl, she naturally felt very much obliged to Krishna, and she was also attracted by his beauty. Without hesitation, she caught the rear part of his cloth and began to pull it. She smiled flirtatiously and admitted that she was agitated by lusty desires. She forgot that she was on the street and before the elder brother of Krishna and his friends. She frankly proposed to Krishna, 'My dear hero, I cannot leave you in this way. You must come to my place. I am already very much attracted to your beauty, so I must receive you well. And since you are the best amongst males, you must also be very kind upon me.'" So Srila Prabhupada writes, almost like a conclusion, in plain words, she proposed that Krishna come to her home and satisfy her lusty desires. And Srimad Bhagavatam 10:48-8 adds, quote, "Kubja prayed to her exclusive Lord, 'Please only enjoy with me and with no other woman.' So Krishna replied, 'My dear girl, my mission here in Mathura is not yet complete. When it is, I will surely visit your home. You are the most caring woman I have met so far in Mathura.'" So with these sweet words of assurance, Krishna left Kubja and continued on, and Kubja herself slowly made her way through the streets of Mathura back to her humble home. Her home was actually a very simple residence, hardly more than a grass hut, it said. But when she arrived there, Kubja saw that Krishna's kindness had transformed her residence into a stunning palace. Shastra describes that the palace was built by Vishwakarma on Krishna's order as part of her reward for fearlessly offering him the perfume and ointments that were meant for Kamsa. And stunned, Kubja slowly entered the opulent building with its marble floors and marble walls and marble pillars inlaid with valuable gems. And she was met by hundreds of lady attendants, servants, eager to serve her in many ways. So they bathed Kubja, they dressed her in opulent silks and jewels, offered her a first-class meal, prasadam, and then they escorted her to a golden bed inlaid with gems. When I was reading that, I was thinking, what a dramatic change. She was previously a hunchback woman scraping a little money together to make ends meet, and suddenly, by Krishna's grace, she's living in this luxury and this opulence. That's indicated here, in particular, by the fact that she now had hundreds of maidservants helping her in every way. That was typical in Vedic culture amongst wealthy people or royalty in particular, or any culture for that matter. In those cultures, the wealthy, the royalty, they had many, many servants who did everything for their masters. Little historical note I was reading the other day, because I like to read about the history of India to see what it was before, so we can make it like that again. Bharat, the land of transcendental knowledge. And I was reading that, I think it was in the 1700s or 1800s, there's a story about a Muslim king, the Nizam of Lucknow, who had many, many servants. And throughout his entire life, because in these royal families you're trained as a prince from a very young age to become a statesman, to act as a king later on. So he was well taken care of his whole life. So I noted that throughout his entire life, he had so many servants doing things for him, that this prince or this king eventually, he never put on his own shoes. He had servants just for that purpose, to put on his shoes. It may seem a little odd to us now, but you look at those paintings from days of yore and you see people dress, royalties, they dress very opulently, and the shoes weren't like shoes today. There were many ties and many this and that, and to pull them on and so forth and so on. So he had servants just for that purpose. They would put his shoes on every day. But at one point in history, when the British, or let us say the British Army, attacked Lucknow, where he was the king, there was a terrible panic. And all of his servants fled, leaving the king alone. So this is a true story. He stood there in his room shouting, "Hey, somebody put my shoes on." Didn't know how to do it. But no one did. Everyone had fled. So he didn't move because he didn't have shoes. It was like a battle going on. He didn't go barefoot. He didn't know how to do it. So it's described that the British very easily took him as prisoner. Anyway, it's an interesting story. So many servants. So suddenly Kubja, she was extremely wealthy and she had many, many servants. So some of those servants, fanned her and took care of her, and it's described that when she laid down, she fell asleep and dreamt of Krishna. So Jiva Goswami, particularly at this point, he writes in Gopal Champu that in Uttara Champu 434, he writes that, quote, "Devotion makes the heart shine with a righteousness that eventually becomes visible like Kubja's." And I was thinking of our devotees, our ISKCON devotees, that they're shining with a righteousness by Srila Prabhupada's mercy and training that's very visible. One time Jayananda Prabhu walked into a darshan Prabhupada was conducting, and Prabhupada said, "Oh look, Jayananda looks just like Lord Chaitanya." So that shine is there, that glow is there. Said that the soul is more brilliant than 10,000 suns rising simultaneously. So when the material desire is removed, the fog of illusion is moved, then you see the sunshine of Krishna consciousness reflecting on the heart of a devotee. Now, remember Krishna had made a promise to Kubja. He said, "I will surely visit your home." But he didn't do so immediately. Actually, he didn't even visit Kubja's home on that visit to Mathura. The Acharyas say that was because his main reason for coming to Mathura was to kill Kamsa. And soon after Kamsa had been killed, Vasudeva sent Krishna and Balaram to Sandipani Muni's ashram, the Gurukul, for 2 months. And then upon his return to Mathura, after completing the Gurukul, Krishna, in Mathura, sent Uddhava to Vrindavan, where Uddhava remained for 6 to 8 months. And it was only after Uddhava's return from Braja, you could calculate that about a year after Krishna's first meeting with Kubja, Krishna finally fulfilled his promise to visit her home. So while Uddhava had been in Vrindavan, Krishna had just been waiting and had purposefully not visited Kubja during the 8 months that Uddhava was in Vrindavan. It's described because he wanted Uddhava to accompany him to Kubja's new residence. So finally, taking Uddhava with him, Krishna arrived at Kubja's home unannounced, whereupon Kubja and her many, many assistants gave the Lord a proper welcome, including a proper seat to sit on. And I was impressed that when I read that Uddhava was similarly received by Kubja and her girlfriends, but he did not want to sit on any seat equal to the level where Krishna was sitting. And thus he simply sat down on the floor. Such an exalted devotee. So during that welcome, Kubja bathed Lord Krishna's lotus feet. And then Kubja requested Krishna to join her in her private chambers for loving pastimes. Now, Srila Prabhupada very nicely describes this part of the pastime in chapter 48 of Krishna book. And I would just like to quote Srila Prabhupada. He writes, Kubja took her bath and smeared her body with sandalwood pulp. She dressed herself with nice garments, valuable jewelry, ornaments, and flower garlands. After chewing betel nut and other intoxicating edibles, and spraying herself with various perfumes and scents, she appeared before Krishna. Prabhupada writes, her smiling glance and moving eyebrows were full of feminine bashfulness as she stood gracefully before Lord Krishna, who is known as Mahadeva, the husband of the goddess of fortune. Prabhupada continues, when Krishna saw Kubja hesitating to come before him, he immediately caught hold of her hand, which was decorated with bangles. With great affection, he brought her near to him and made her sit by his side. Simply by having previously supplied the pulp of sandalwood to the Supreme Lord Krishna, Kubja became freed from all sinful reactions and became eligible to enjoy with him. And by smelling the fragrance of Krishna's lotus feet, she was immediately relieved of all lusty desires. She was thus allowed to embrace Krishna with her arms and mitigate her long cherished desire to have him as a visitor in her house. I like that last sentence. She was thus allowed to embrace Krishna with her arms and mitigate her long cherished desire to have him as a visitor in her house. Unquote, Srila Prabhupada. Now, someone may, well, not devotees, but those without proper knowledge, they may challenge that it was immoral for Krishna to be in such a situation. But we know that there's no lust in Krishna, there's no lust in Krishna. In the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, chapter 31, Srila Prabhupada makes this very clear in Krishna's amorous dealings with his devotees. Prabhupada writes, when Krishna sees that both Radharani and her associates are pleased by Krishna's association, he becomes more satisfied. Such loving reciprocation has nothing to do with material lust, although it resembles the material union between man and woman. How could there be lust in Krishna? His body is not made of material elements, wherein lust reposes. His body is made of the spiritual elements of eternity, knowledge, and bliss. Now, there's a great Vaishnavacharya, his name is Sri Harisuri, who lived, I think, in the 1700s, very respected Vaishnavacharya. And he wrote on many of Krishna's pastimes. He was a Brajabasi by heart. And he gives a very interesting explanation how Krishna's intimate dealings with Kubja were actually appropriate and acceptable. He's now actually being studied by our GBC Shastrik committee. The GBC set up a committee of learned devotees who know Sanskrit and they're very philosophical, etc. And they're studying the writings of many great Vaishnavacharyas. So Sri Harisuri, he says that Krishna's intimate dealings with Kubja were appropriate and acceptable. How is that? He writes that before entering Kubja's room, Krishna accepted Kubja in front of Uddhava. Uddhava was present. Krishna accepted Kubja in front of Uddhava. Then he explains that one of the Sanskrit translations of the word Uddhava is the fire of Vedic sacrifice. The Medini Kosha dictionary says, Uddhava kratu pavake. Kratu means sacrifice, and pavake means fire. So Harisuri says, Krishna took Kubja's hand in front of Uddhava, meaning in front of the sacrificial fire. Uddhava kratu pavake. Just like, well, he says, thus Krishna accepted Kubja like a wife. Just like when the man and woman come before the sacrificial fire to be together, well, they do that for the purpose of marriage. The marriage ceremony, there's the sacrificial fire. So it's very interesting. Thus, Krishna accepted Kubja like a wife, he says. And he concludes, therefore, his enjoyment with her cannot be considered as improper. Just like we don't consider Krishna's enjoying with 16,108 wives in Dwarka in this Fakir relationship, the married relationship. So in this way, Shri Harisuri justifies Krishna's enjoying with Kubja. Now as far as Kubja's lust, which, her feelings were not fully transcendental in the beginning, we explained how that was purified in the Lord's association. One Acharya writes very nicely, quote, "The fragrance of Krishna's lotus feet has a unique feature. It grants fearlessness from Cupid's torments to those who fully surrender to Krishna, as graphically shown in his pastimes with Kubja of Mathura." So by Krishna's association, Kubja, you could say, graduated into a pure devotee of the Lord. Now we'd like to go a little bit deeper with the help of our superiors, our acharyas. While further analyzing this pastime, our acharyas say that Krishna's invitation, or rather Kubja's invitation to Krishna to enjoy pastimes with her was, quote, an expression of her love for him. This love, however, was mixed with the desire to enjoy Krishna, rather than to give exclusive enjoyment to him, as in the case of the gopis' love for the Lord. Her devotion was there, but it was mixed. She wanted to enjoy Krishna rather than to give exclusive enjoyment to him. Now Rupa Goswami analyzes this in Ujjvala Nilamani, 14th chapter, verses 40 to 59. He describes three kinds of love, or rati, for Krishna. It's really interesting. He says the love Kubja had for Krishna is called ordinary love, sadharani, due to its being motivated by the desire to enjoy Krishna. However, the queens of Vrindavan, their love for Krishna is called proper, or samanjasa, because it's motivated by a desire for personal enjoyment in addition to Krishna's enjoyment. Then he says, but the love the gopis have for Krishna is called perfect, samartha, for their love is devoid of any personal motivation, as they only desire Krishna's happiness. Then Rupa Goswami says, what motivates one's love determines the stage of love one is able to achieve. What motivates one's love determines the stage of love one is able to achieve. So Rupa Goswami goes on. He says that this sadharani rati, or Kubja's love, it culminates in prema. But the queens of Dwarka, their samanjasa rati, it culminates in anuraga. We looked up anuraga. Anuraga briefly is an intensified stage of prema, which comes just prior to mahabhava. And then samartharati, as in the Vyaja Gopis, their love culminates in mahabhava. So it's deep, but these are the subject matters of connoisseurs who really want to understand what is Krishna consciousness, the science of bhakti, or love. It's all about love. So we spend time studying these things as devotees. Now, even though Rupa Goswami has described Kubja's love for Krishna as mixed with a desire to enjoy Krishna, and has classified it as ordinary prema. Prema is a very exalted stage, but as ordinary prema, we found a quote in the Brahma Vaivarta Purana, where Lord Narayan says, and I quote, "After Krishna's visit to her home, Kubja entered Golok Vrindavan and became a gopi named Chandramukhi." Lord Narayan, after Krishna's visit to her home, Kubja entered Goloka Vrindavan and became a gopi named Chandramukhi. Of course, there was some time. It's not that she immediately went, because there's a few other pastimes with her that take place. But yes, she attained Goloka Vrindavan. So, it's described after spending time with Krishna, Kubja, like all devotees, was distressed at the thought of being separated from him. So she asked him, "Please come back again." And Krishna agreed. Just like he said to the gopis of Vrindavan, he agreed. But did he return to Kubja's home? Not according to the words of the Vyaja Gopis, who were experienced in these matters, but Krishna had promised them he would return, so they're experienced. Not according to the words of the Vyaja Gopis. And we hear those words in Garga Samhita 5:18-11. Just hear what the gopis say. Quote, "Just as a single crooked sword can kill many straight people, why would Krishna, who is himself bent in 3 places, not cheat Kubja also? Just as a single crooked sword can kill many straight people, why would Krishna, who is himself bent in 3 places, not cheat Kubja also?" They're kind of saying that because they got cheated, transcendentally cheated. Again, separation makes the heart grow fonder, but these are the discussions. So while there's I couldn't find any record of Krishna's personally visiting Kubja again, Vaishnava tradition, Braj tradition, holds that the deity of Madan Gopal, that deity, that beautiful black deity, who later became famous as Madan Mohan, a deity worshipped later by Srila Sanatana Goswami, that deity came into Kubja's possession. And she worshipped that deity throughout the rest of her life, however many years that was, before going to Goloka Vrindavan. Wow. And therefore, the tradition says that Krishna was true to his word. Kubja had wanted Krishna as her exclusive Lord. He wanted him to come to her home. Exclusive. Kaivalya Natam, her exclusive Lord. Kaivalya Natam. And by coming in his deity form, Krishna satisfied Kubja's desire in a way that others could not complain. At least no one was jealous of Kubja's good fortune. Rather, in the mood of a pure Vaishnava, pure Vaishnavi, it's described even the gopis who were, let's be frank, Kubja's rivals. There's some little rivalry, but not in the sense that we know. Increases everyone's attachment to Krishna between the gopis and the ladies of Mathura. But even the gopis, described as Kubja's rivals, they praised her good fortune. The gopis are praising Kubja. Because after all was said and done, the Vyaja Gopis, they said of Kubja, and I love this part, "She was crooked, now she is straight. She was a maid, now she is honored. She was ugly, now she is beautiful. Let the victory drums sound for her." Please allow me to repeat that. She was crooked, now she is straight. She was a maid. Now she is honored. She was ugly. Now she is beautiful. Let the victory drums sound for her. This is a Vaishnava. Always wanting to glorify others. Never criticizing. Having faith that anyone who takes up the process, especially chanting Hare Krishna, whatever impurities are there, whatever is not right, Cheto dharpana marjanam, it will go away. And the real devotee becomes manifest. And quite quickly. Quite quickly. Not 10,000 years, but very quickly. One time Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakura said it in an initiation ceremony. I see no reason why all my disciples cannot go back home, back to Godhead in one lifetime, if we take advantage of our good fortune. So, reflecting on this pastime, once again we can see how merciful Krishna is, Krishna and his devotees. They're merciful even to the most fallen, sinful, unqualified persons, even animals for that matter. The following are examples of how different living entities became lovers of Krishna. We find this in the Bhagavatam, 11th canto, 12th chapter, I think it's verses 3 and 4, as well as in Jiva Goswami's commentary to those verses in his Bhakti Shandarbha Anucheda 239. There, Krishna is speaking to Uddhava. He says, Te nadita shruti gana na pashita mahattama avrat atapa tapasya matsangama upagataha. And I quote, the following persons did not undergo serious studies of the Vedic literature, nor did they worship great saintly persons, nor did they execute severe vows or austerities. Simply by association with me and my devotees, they achieved me. Sadhushanga sadhushanga sarvashastakoi lavamatra sadhusanga sarvastiti hoy. Then Krishna gives Uddhava some examples. He says, the demon Vritasura, for example, in his previous life as King Chittaketu, he was blessed by Narada and Angira. He says, Prahlad's another example. He was blessed by Narada in his mother's womb, and he attained prema. Then another demon, Varishaparva. Krishna says, Varishaparva. He was abandoned by his mother, but later was raised by a sage in the forest, and he became a great devotee. And then he says there's Bali Maharaj, who became an associate of the Lord simply out of affection for his grandfather, Prahlad. Then he says, amongst animals, the Lord delivered the elephant Gajendra because in a previous life, Gajendra kept company with devotees. And he says, the great bird Jatayu achieved perfection because he associated with Garuda. Birds of a feather flock together. So Krishna says, continues, as he concludes, Kubja of Mathura serves as an example of a servant of a demon, Kamsa, who by Narada's association in a previous life was blessed to host and serve Lord Krishna in her home for 3 days. Now it's worth noting that most of the devotees mentioned achieve perfection because they by simple or informal interactions with great souls or Krishna, without knowing the truth of those great souls' exalted nature. Prahlad was in the womb. He didn't know who Narada Muni was, but he got the effect. So it's certainly possible for unqualified souls to become qualified by the mercy of Krishna and his devotees. When Krishna and his representatives engage us in devotional service, we gradually become purified, because it's the process that purifies us. They lead us the way, they show us the way, as Krishna says in the Gita. I can be understood as I am only by the process of devotional service. So this is what Guru does. He engages us in a variety of services. And that becomes our qualification, irregardless of who we are. We may not be mature, we may not have knowledge, we may not be pious, we may not be noble, we may be frivolous. Krishna is pleased by devotional service. Now this is very nicely described by Rupa Goswami again in Padyavali, verse 8, one of my all-time favorites. Where was the hunter Dharma's piety? Where was Dhruva's maturity? Where was Gajendra's knowledge? Where was Kubja's beauty? Where was Sudama's wealth? Where was Vidura's noble birth? Where was Ugrasena's chivalrous strength? They had none of these things, but the Lord accepted them because Lord Madhava is pleased only by devotional service and not by any material qualification. Prahlad Maharaj says something very similar in the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. He says, one may possess wealth, an aristocratic family, beauty, austerity, education, sensory expertise, luster, influence, physical strength, diligence, intelligence, and mystic power. But I think that even by all these qualifications, one cannot satisfy the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, one can satisfy the Lord simply by devotional service. And he gives an example. Gajendra did this, and thus the Lord was satisfied by him. So what kind of devotional service? Devotional service with love. It's not so much what the service is, but it's the mood in which we perform the service. We can offer Krishna with love, a fruit or a flower or a leaf. And he can be pleased if we try to muster up, try to awaken, Jiv Jago, that love that we have for Krishna deep in the heart. It's sleeping. The soul is sleeping. How do you wake up a sleeping man? By sound. How do you wake up a sleeping soul? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now before we finish, we should also note that the love attained by the various kinds of living entities we mentioned, or let's say Krishna mentioned, that love was not necessarily all of the same quality. Just like gold, although appreciable, it comes in different gradations. 9 karat, 18 karat, 22 karat, and even to these days you can buy 24 karat gold. So Krishna kind of concludes that whole discussion by, he makes a point to Uddhava. He says that all these devotees love Krishna, but he says the gopis' love is extra special. And we are being introduced to that love by Srila Prabhupada, by our previous acharyas, by Madhavinda Puri, by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even in our fallen state. This is the amazing thing. Namo Mahabhadanaya Krishna Prem Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaur Trishve Namaha. Rupa Goswami, in his first vision, actual vision of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when he met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu at Ramkeli, he expressed this: there's no more merciful incarnation than you, because you're giving this Braj Bhakti to the most fallen people. What is this? The least qualified get the highest thing. Of course, we have to work for it. We have to earn the merit by sincere service to Guru and Gauranga. So we too, dear devotees, certainly fall into the category, not fall into the category, we're elevated into the category of fallen souls who receive special mercy. And that mercy comes from our beloved Srila Prabhupada. He's the fountainhead of our mercy in every regard. By his constant mercy upon us, we continue to make progress day by day to the highest goal of life, Goloka Vrindavan. You could say, I was thinking Prabhupada's mercy is threefold. Well, it's unlimited, but threefold in that by His grace we gave up material life, by His grace we're maintained in our spiritual lives, and by His grace one day we will be ushered, such a nice word, we will be ushered into the spiritual world. So we have to remember Him at least 3 times a day. So today, I'd like to finish with the verse from, again, Srila Rupa Goswami, Vyaja. This is verse number 5. It's short but very sweet, and it again reminds us of the very auspicious nature of Krishna's mercy, which Prabhupada has introduced us to. And we'll finish with this quote. Quote, Lord Krishna, who is like a sun rising in darkness, like a boat to the drowning, like a sweet rain cloud to those dying of thirst, like fabulous wealth to the poverty-stricken, like an infallible physician to those afflicted with the most painful disease, has come to grant auspiciousness to us. Bhagavan Shri Krishna ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Mathura Dham ki. So we'll end here. Every time I have to offer my gratitude to you, and I hope this little adjustment that we've made by giving, from now on we'll give classes like this every Tuesday and Wednesday just in English. I hope it pleases you. For the Russian-speaking devotees, we're going to continue giving, I can't probably say the same lecture, but a very similar lecture. I mean, I have my notes, I work with notes. I'm a scripted devotee, I work with notes, so the classes will be very same, so we'll have English, and then we'll have English translated into Russian, because I like to speak, I don't want subtitles and that kind of stuff. So thank you for this wonderful service, to the Vaishnavas, to my Guru Maharaj Srila Prabhupada, and to Lord Krishna. I'm very happy doing this, and I'll work very hard the next few days to present. Why don't we do, I think the next pastime actually is, because we covered Krishna's entrance, let's go to the Krishna's killing Kamsa. There's a lot of details there as well. I was getting a peek ahead. We'll speak about that. This will be the 3rd lecture on Mathura. Thank you. Today's Tuesday. Look forward to being with all of you again on Friday. Shri Shri Gauranitai ki, Shri Krishna Balaram ki, Shri Shri Radha Shamasundar ki, Vrindavan Ishwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Mathura Dham ki, Vrindavan Dham ki, back home, back to Godhead. Take all the fallen conditioned souls with us. Hare Krishna. See you soon.